Tonight on KPBS Evening Edition, a vote to change how police use deadly force. A San Diego lawmaker's bill moves forward. Why Shirley Weber says it will be a major change for California. And prosecutors say they've broken up a crime ring that stole millions of dollars from the state through online charter schools.
And I knew instantly she was something special when I saw her moving her little arms and kicking her legs. So we're very blessed to be able to take care of her.
Doctors and nurses at Sharp Mary Birch Hospital talk about delivering and caring for the smallest premature baby ever born.
You know, you look at the legislation, and it's designed to bring outside capital into under-invested communities. So it's a perfect recipe for gentrification and displacement.
Investing in opportunity zones, how a government program could bring changes to City Heights. KPBS Evening Edition starts right now. Good evening. It's Wednesday, May 29th. Thanks for joining us. I'm Ebony Monet. California lawmakers back a bill to change the legal standard for police shootings. AB 392, known as the California Act to Save Lives, was approved 66-2 by the full Assembly. It was authored by San Diego Assemblywoman Shirley Weber. The bill would update the use of force standard from reasonable to necessary. Before today's vote, Weber spoke about her motivation for the change.
This is a 400-year challenge to an African American in this country. Because of the definition of our lives and the vulnerability of African Americans, whether it was dealing with law enforcement, whether it was dealing with lynch mobs, or what it was that whole issue that we had. Our lives were always precarious and could easily be taken without any justice or anyone fighting back. And so I took this responsibility very seriously because I respect you, and I wanted you to understand what we were doing, that this is going to make a tremendous difference in California. And we recognize that as all of the analysis says that this will be the most powerful force or the strongest bill about when you use lethal force in any state in this nation. But I'm also mostly thankful to two little kids who inspire me every day, and their name is Kadir and Jaleel, my grandsons who are 7 and 5, because I've made a commitment that I never want to have that conversation with them. Their life is idyllic. They have great friends of all colors. They enjoy life, and they believe at this point that they have just as much right and respect as any other child in this nation, and that should never change.
Police groups resisted the bill but reached a compromise last week over how the word necessary is defined. A line that defined it as no reasonable alternative was removed. AB 392 still needs to clear the state Senate. A statewide charter school network is accused of stealing more than $50 million in public funds. KPBS reporter Milena Spitzer has details on the alleged scheme, which includes a school in San Diego.
11 people have been indicted on charges of grand theft, financial conflict of interest, conspiracy, and misappropriation of public funds. Their alleged scheme involved a company called A3 Education, which sought out small school districts with limited experience in state oversight to create online charter schools in San Diego County and across the state. Many of these schools didn't actually provide services, instead buying names of students from youth organizations and private schools, enrolling them in online charter schools, often without their knowledge. The charter schools then solicited oversight fees from the state, ranging from $2,000 to $5,000 per child. San Diego County District Attorney Summer Stephan, whose office spent a year investigating the case, said the stolen money was desperately needed by the school districts it was siphoned from.
When you have schools where teachers have to buy supplies from their own pocket, and you see that $50 million is funneled right off the top from monies that should be going for direct educational services for our kids, that's a problem, and that's why we invested a year to investigate this wide-ranging fraud.
The defendants include ringleader Australian national Sean McManus and his Long Beach business partner Jason Schrock, who funneled funds to personal bank accounts and projects, including the purchase of a private residence. Also among the indicted is Dehesa School Superintendent Nancy Hauer, whose district authorized several charter schools. 40,000 students across the state were enrolled in the charter schools while the scheme was in operation between January 2016 and April 2018. Milena Spitzer, KPBS News.
Sharp Healthcare says the world's smallest surviving baby is thriving. KPBS reporter Matt Hoffman says the infant was just 8.6 ounces at birth.
The baby, nicknamed Sabi, was born after 23 weeks and 3 days, nearly half the time of a full-term pregnancy. It wasn't clear at first if Sabi would survive.
Many babies are born this size that don't survive.
But Sabi was different. Against all odds, she made it, and now at 5 months old, she just went home with her parents.
Like any parent, they were so scared at the beginning because we're very honest. We say we're not sure if your baby's going to survive this small and this early.
Sabi's parents are choosing to remain anonymous. They did record a short video that was played for Sabi's primary care nurses, which brought them to tears.
We had so many nurses, but her primary nurses were just, they became friends. I don't want to cry. Look at all those signs. They made it. You know, I would come in, and then it's like, happy birthday, Mom. It's just, I'm so grateful for them.
It wasn't clear if Sabi would survive. Her primary care physician, Dr. Paul Wozniak, says when born, she wasn't able to use her lungs, so they had to insert a breathing tube.
We told the folks for the first week it's going to be hour by hour. And she was really quite sick the first week or so, and then got better and better.
Despite being born so premature, doctors say Sabi is in good health, and she will continue to be monitored for years.
Follow her up through grade school to do special developmental tests, and if she has some lag and like speech or something, then intervene right then and there to maximize her good outcome.
Sabi is now breathing on her own, and doctors are hopeful for her future.
It's not always as fortunate, but she really is one in a million.
Matt Hoffman, KPBS News.
Pregnant women have been warned not to smoke for 50-plus years. KPBS reporter Chelina Chatlani says now researchers at UC San Diego say mothers who smoke after giving birth could also be harming their babies.
At the UC San Diego School of Medicine, researchers have been looking at brains, specifically mouse brains, like the ones dissected here in a petri dish. They did this as part of a new study, which looked at what would happen to newborn mice if they were exposed to high levels of nicotine through breastfeeding, something like 1 to 2 packs a day.
So it's definitely something we want to watch.
Davide Dulcis, a psychiatry professor here and lead researcher, says when these mice grew up, they developed a taste for the drug.
So they were placed in cages where they had 2 bottles. So one bottle was just water, and the other bottle is a nicotine saline, nicotine solution. And so it's a voluntary intake. They have to choose whether they want to drink from the water bottle or from the nicotine solution. And what we found was that the mice that were exposed to nicotine early on in the first 2 weeks of life, they would quickly develop this preference for nicotine solution compared to their siblings that have never been exposed to nicotine before.
Dulcis says these mice were more likely to have addictive tendencies, a finding he says could apply to human newborns of mothers who are heavy smokers or nicotine users. That's because when he looked at the brains of mice exposed to nicotine, there were more dopamine cells, which are known for causing feelings of pleasure or happiness. And the brains were creating a type of reward response for nicotine use.
So we can actually record in actual neurons when they are exposed to nicotine. So we perfuse nicotine in the brain section, and then we see what happens to these neurons and compare what happens in control versus nicotine-treated mice.
Dulcis says he thinks this research could help scientists create drugs that could block addictive behaviors in humans, especially in children. Chelina Chatlani, KPBS News.
Researchers say smoking isn't the only concern. They say nicotine packages and vaping could also have damaging effects. The number of migrants arriving to San Diego from Texas that have the flu is on the rise. KPBS reporter John Carroll has an update from the county health department.
Asylum seekers, primarily families, began arriving from the Lone Star State on May 19th. Since then, the county has published daily statistics on how many migrants are screened and how many test positive for the flu. The numbers for Wednesday show 97 people screened, with 12 testing positive just today. There were no cases among the new arrivals Wednesday that were serious enough to require hospitalization. 82 people, 33 of whom are members of families, are currently quarantined in hotels. That's a big jump from yesterday when 36 people were quarantined at hotels, 14 of which are members of families. The county health department says everyone with the flu must have recovered from the illness before they'll be allowed to travel elsewhere. This latest group of asylum seekers are being brought to San Diego to relieve overcrowding at shelters in Texas. John Carroll, KPBS News.
A program to incentivize development in San Diego's economically distressed areas could bring change to City Heights. KPBS reporter Priya Sridhar tells us the impact of being named an Opportunity Zone.
This is City Heights. It was designated an Opportunity Zone by the U.S. Department of Treasury because of its poverty, business activity, and geographic diversity. Opportunity Zone investors get a tax discount after 5 or 7 years and ultimately pay no taxes on capital gains after 10 years.
A really simple example, you have $1 million that you've made in the stock market. You take that $1 million and you roll it into one of these funds. Rather than paying taxes next year, you don't pay taxes until 2027.
Recently, Steve Glickman, a former Obama administration economic advisor and architect of the Opportunity Zone program, visited San Diego to talk to investors and community leaders about the program.
And in the meantime, you can take that $1 million and invest in something new, like in an affordable housing project. And whatever profits you make on that project, as long as you've held your investment for 10 years or more, are now tax-free.
But the policy is purposely written broadly. There is no restriction on what investors can develop, and that's something critics of the program say worry them.
An accepted definition of gentrification is outside capital and more affluent people moving in from outside of the area into an area.
Eric Tilkmeyer from the City Heights Development Corporation says he worries longtime City Heights residents will get priced out of their neighborhood.
You know, you look at the legislation, and it's designed to bring outside capital into under-invested communities. So it's a perfect recipe for gentrification and displacement.
A recent study by Zillow Economic Research says home sales in areas that received Opportunity Zone designations increased 20% year over year compared to single-digit growth in areas that met Opportunity Zone qualifications but didn't receive the designation. The gentrification concern is on the city of San Diego's radar, too. Luis Ojeda is with the Economic Development Department of the city of San Diego.
Gentrification is a real issue, and then also displacement. And sometimes both of them go hand in hand. So we have to think about those issues, set up policies that incentivizes and promotes the ones that are doing the potential positive outcomes, such as increasing jobs, creating affordable housing and minimum housing.
The city currently has no way of tracking opportunity investors. An online portal will show investors federal and state incentives to help them invest in economically distressed communities in a positive way. Sasha Favalukis says opportunity zones can be transformative, but the investments must be handled carefully.
It also has the ability to be done wrong, and when paper money goes into economically distressed areas, there's a process to it, and you have to really involve the community and give in order for the community to be supportive. And a lot of these areas aren't ready to be built.
He's the co-founder of CoPlace, a company that activates underutilized real estate in opportunity zones. Right now, they're converting a 7,000 square foot lot in City Heights. This property is zoned for 10 one-bedroom, 600 square foot apartments. But because the cost to build is so high, he says he'd have to rent the units for $1,800 a month.
So if I were to build those units, I don't know who would live there, who could afford to live in them based on the cost of living.
Glickman, the author of the Opportunity Zone program, says rising housing prices is a trade-off for investments cities might have never had otherwise.
For most places, their biggest trigger for displacement is too little investment, not too much. It's the fact that people have to leave to find jobs and to build businesses and to, find a kind of a vibrant place to live in.
While it might be too early to tell, most stakeholders and community leaders are hoping the program will help stimulate the economy of distressed neighborhoods in San Diego, like City Heights. Priya Sridhar, KPBS News.
To find out more about this program, go to kpbs.org. This sunny weather is expected to stick around for the rest of the week. Dajia Swad has tonight's forecast.
Dry conditions for tonight in San Diego. As you notice on your satellite from earlier today, not a lot of moisture into California. We, however, do have an upper level trough that is going to continue to allow for energy to ride into Nevada as well as into the Four Corners. So that's going to be the focus for some wet weather for the coming days. So any travel plans there, definitely keep that in mind. But if you're staying here in San Diego, we're looking at clouds becoming cloudy tonight, a low 58, and Oceanside, a low of 54, and cooling down to 67 in Borrego Springs. Overnight low in Mount Laguna at 47 with the partly cloudy skies. For tomorrow, coast's going to be staying cool as you head further inland. That's where you find the warmth, and that's going to be the trend for much of your weekend as well. 70 in Oceanside for the high tomorrow, 71 in San Diego, and then topping off at 97 in Borrego Springs and the upper 60s in Mount Laguna. And most of these temperatures are right where we should be for this time of year. For this weekend, wet weather to our north or well to our east. We're going to be on the dry side for the weekend. We will notice, however, some low clouds, especially during the morning and nighttime hours at the coast. Temperatures in the upper 60s into your Sunday and Monday. Then as we head inland areas, we'll be in the mid 70s Friday. Warming up into the lower, cooling down rather into the lower 70s Saturday and Sunday with a bit more cloud cover. So that's going to prevent the sun to shine as abundant. And we'll be in the 90s for the deserts for the next several days. Lots of sunshine Friday, a bit more cloud cover Saturday, and looking at a dry forecast even into the early week. If you're out towards the mountains, you're looking at temperatures in the 60s for Friday and Saturday, feeling cool as we head into the late week, but we'll be looking at warmer conditions for Monday with a high of 68 out towards the mountains. Reporting for KPBS News, I'm your meteorologist, Dajia Swad. Back to you.
Jeopardy host Alec Trebek says his response to cancer treatments has been mind-boggling. That's how Trebek described his progress to People magazine. The 78-year-old says he's near remission, according to his doctors. Trebek announced in March that he was battling stage 4 pancreatic cancer, which has a low survival rate. He's still receiving chemotherapy as he records episodes of Jeopardy! UC San Diego researchers are finding higher suicide rates among nurses. MedPage reporter Shannon Firth is covering how the industry is addressing the issue. She talked with KPBS Midday Edition co-host Jade Hyman. Well, Shannon, I want to thank you for coming here today.
Thank you for having me, Jade.
So you write about a Southern California nurse who died by suicide, and the reaction to her death by her emergency room colleagues really gives insight into how that industry deals with this. Can you talk about that for a bit?
Sure. So I wrote about a nurse named Dana who is this vibrant, energetic, caring, smart, funny nurse who took her own life last year. And when that happened, a lot of her nurse colleagues and even her family were really shocked by this. Even though they're medical professionals and they're trained to recognize the signs of depression and suicide, they really never saw this coming. And the reaction to her death among the leadership at the hospital where she worked was also kind of a second blow for some of the nurses at that hospital. They felt like they weren't given the time to grieve that they needed. There was a crisis debriefing for people who had worked directly on Dana, because Dana was brought to the same hospital where she worked. And there was a sort of memorial for her. They put up a memorial box in the nurses' lounge. But on the whole, the message from leadership was, shh, don't talk about this. We don't want to hear you talking about this at the hospital. Here's a number to call if you need to talk to someone, but we need this kept quiet.
And the stigma surrounding depression in the medical community is an issue. Can you talk to me about how that impacts who gets treatment?
Sure. So stigma in general in society around mental health is very strong, even now, even with the celebrities and the pop stars coming out talking about their mental health issues. Within medicine, stigma is extremely strong. Even though medical professionals will see a patient and be caring towards that patient, among themselves, it's not uncommon for them to talk about, the crazy in bed 3. Or if there's an overdose, they might joke, well, that person didn't do a very good job, did they? And I think that kind of language and that behavior is observed and absorbed by those people who may be struggling themselves, and they do not want to be lumped into that category of patient.
And you spoke to a researcher at UC San Diego who is frustrated, really frustrated with the fact that there is no tracking on this. What is she doing to fix that?
Sure, yes. I spoke with Judy Davidson, who is a nurse scientist, and she talked to me a little bit about this problem, this lack of data. When she first realized when there were a few suicides at UC San Diego, University of California, San Diego, she wanted to know how common the problem was and was frustrated by not having any data. So she started looking in San Diego County. She and a team of researchers and colleagues looked at the medical examiner data in San Diego County and then did see a signal there, did see that there was a higher suicide rate among nurses than the general female population. And you have to look at females versus males because males are 3 to 4 times as likely to complete suicide. Since nursing is a female-dominant profession, you want to measure apples to apples. So she looked at the San Diego County data, and then from there she said, okay, we see something, but it's only a small sample size. So she wanted the national data. So she looked to the CDC's own data set for violent deaths, and she tried to parse that data. Now the CDC data set, the NVDRS, it's the National Violent Death Reporting System, that has data, at the time she was looking, it had data for about 18 states. So she got a sense of what was happening there, and she saw again a signal that there is a higher rate of suicide among nurses, but it's only 18 states. And she could only get limited data because that gender breakdown piece isn't always available. So what we have right now are those studies and then studies outside of the US. So Denmark, Canada, Australia, in those countries they've done studies, and in all of the published studies that we've seen, the suicide rates among nurses are higher.
So what are some of your biggest takeaways from this reporting?
One of my biggest takeaways here has been that the stigma in healthcare among healthcare providers is incredibly dangerous, life-threatening. If people are afraid to ask for help, if they're afraid to seek care, they may die rather than be hospitalized, rather than seek treatment, rather than have it known among their colleagues that they have an issue, they may take their own life.
This is all very eye-opening. Shannon Firth, Washington correspondent with MedPage Today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Jade.
You can hear the rest of that interview on the KPBS Midday Podcast. If you or someone you know is struggling with thoughts of suicide, call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-TALK for support and resources.
Robert Mueller breaks his silence, leaving open whether President Trump obstructed justice. Coming up at 7 after Evening Edition on KPBS. Now here's a recap of tonight's top stories. A San Diego lawmaker's police reform bill is moving forward. AB 392 passed the Assembly by a vote of 66-2. The bill, authored by Assemblywoman Shirley Weber, changes the legal standard for police shootings from reasonable to necessary. Nearly a dozen people are charged with conspiracy and other crimes in a scheme involving online charter schools. The schools operate throughout the state under the company A3 Education. Those charged are accused of misusing public money given to charter schools. Sharp Mary Birch Hospital says a baby girl who weighed just 8 ounces at birth is thriving. Doctors and nurses told her story today, nearly 5 months after being born at 23 weeks. She's now home with her mother. The baby girl's name is Sabi and is believed to be the world's smallest surviving baby. Here's a look at what we're working on for tomorrow in the KPBS newsroom. CBD is being included in more products ranging from lotions to food. Morning Edition looks at how it's being regulated. And on Midday Edition, survivors of the Parkland school shooting come to Poway to meet with survivors of last month's synagogue shooting. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks for joining us. Have a great night.